Hi friends, we are now in one of my favorite places where we can start our voyage through the Holy Land, the pilgrimage that we are embarking on here in Old Jaffa, next to the whale made by Ilana Gur, the artist. And I tend to say that this is the whale that swallowed Jonah. Turns out that God told Jonah to go and cry out against the people of Nineveh because their wickedness has reached up to him. But Jonah didn't want to do that. In fact, he wanted to flee from the Lord. And so he went to the port and boarded a boat that was heading to Tarsus. And immediately after setting sail, they got caught in a very, very big storm, which was just around the boat in which Jonah was located. And Jonah understood that he was the cause of it, while the crew members of the boat tried to lighten the load and so started throwing things into the water, but nothing helped. And Jonah, realizing that he's the cause of it, said to them, "Well, cast me into the water." They looked at him and said, "You're crazy, we're not going to do that." But he insisted, and eventually they threw him overboard. And immediately upon him being thrown overboard, the storm calmed, and God had prepared a very large fish or a whale that had swallowed Jonah entirely, and he spent 3 days and nights inside the belly of the whale, praying and asking for forgiveness. And at which time, after that, the whale spat him about 10 kilometers south of us at a place called Tel Jonah. And that's pretty much where our story ends. But the moral of the story is that if you're ever in a hurry, do not take a whale. 3 days, 10 kilometers, you could do that walking way, way faster. Welcome to Old Jaffa. Welcome to Israel, my friends. And we're embarking on the beginning of our journey to discover this land. The very first mention of Jaffa is about 5,000 years ago, right after the Great Flood, when one of the sons of Noah, a man called Japhet, founds this place and names it Jaffa in his honor. And Jaffa becomes an important port city for many different cultures, among them also the Phoenicians. But it doesn't really reach its climax, its glory, until 2,000 years ago, when right here at this place, a major event happens that changes Christianity and makes it the religion that we know today. In Acts 9, we hear about Peter that is in a town called Lydda, very close to Ben Gurion Airport of today, being summoned to come here to Jaffa so as to resurrect young Tabitha that has died. And while in Jaffa, he stays in the house of one Simon the tanner. Tanner, somebody that works with leathers. And while here, he has an amazing vision. He sees he's actually hungry, and while they make him the food, he goes up to the roof, and over there has an ecstasis, a vision. He sees a sheet come down from the heavens, held by all four corners, and full of all sort of four-legged creatures, reptiles, and birds. And an angel says to him, "Rise, Simon Peter, kill and eat." But Peter is a Jew, and among those animals are many that are not kosher, are considered impure. So Peter says, "Never have I eaten anything impure. I'm not about to start eating it right now." And the angel reprimanded him, telling him, "How do you, a human being, dare call something that God placed on this earth unclean?" And this happens 3 times, and the sheet is then taken back to the heavens. And Peter stays perplexed, wondering about the vision that he has had. And let's cut here and go back 2 days earlier to a different place called Caesarea Maritima, where there was a man called Cornelius, who was a centurion of the Italian regiment, the Roman legion. Centurion being a man that has 100 or more people under his control. And this man, Cornelius, was a God-fearing person, not a Jew, of course, but a God-fearing person that did lots of good deeds and gave alms. And one day, as he was standing in the kitchen, an angel approached him and said to him, "Cornelius." He backed down in fear, saying, "What is it, Lord?" And the angel said to him, "Your good alms and deeds have come up before the Lord. He's pleased with your doing. So now send men of trust to Jaffa, to the house of one Simon the tanner, and bring forth Simon Peter that is staying there." So Cornelius summoned 2 servants and a devout soldier and sent them out on their ways to Jaffa. Now back then, of course, we did not have Mercedes buses, and it took them 2 days of walking in order to get to here. So in the afternoon or evening of the 2nd day, as they were approaching Jaffa, Peter had this vision that we talked about. And so they come, they knock on the door. "Hi, good afternoon. Is there, what's his name? Simon Peter staying lodged over here?" And Peter says, "I am he. What do you need?" They say, "Well, listen, our master Cornelius asked that you come with us to Caesarea." So Peter brought them in, gave them dinner, and the next morning, Peter and some of the brothers of Jaffa went to Caesarea. And 2 days later, as they are approaching Caesarea, Cornelius comes to greet them, and he bows in front of Simon Peter. Peter says to him, "Get up, for I too am only a man. What do you need?" And he says something else, very important. "You know that as a Jew, it is illegal for me to associate with non-Jews. But God has taught me not to call anything or anyone," that's already his extended interpretation of this vision, "unclean, and that's why I came." Now that was extremely important, because up until that moment, Judeo-Christianity was a tightly knit clique that did not allow anybody from the outside to come into it. But from that moment onwards, Christianity became the missionary religion that opens its arms and attracts people to it, the religion that we know today. And Cornelius became the very first person to convert to Judaism, to Christianity, without having first been a Jew. And that is the importance of this place. And because this is the beginning of modern Christianity, this is also the beginning of our voyage and pilgrimage in the Holy Land. So as we walk down the streets of Old Jaffa, we see the abundance of the color light blue. And I think this is the time to tell you about the main division between 2 mainstream divisions of Judaism. The first one is the Ashkenazi Jews, Jews whose descendants come from Central and Eastern Europe, whereas the Sephardic Jews are Jews whose forefathers were expelled from Spain and Portugal in 1492 by the Catholic king Fernando and Isabel. And they went and lived in the Maghreb countries, North Africa, Ottoman Empire, among Muslims, among Arabs. And because of that, they have assimilated many of the traditions, customs, and superstitions of the Muslims. Now, the Muslims have a superstition believing that if ever the devil comes for them and seeing their light blue colored doors, windows, and roofs, he will think that it's the sea or the sky and not find them. Now, of course, the artists that live here, they are bohemian, they're not superstitious, but in keeping in line with the Middle Eastern ambience that we have, they are required to maintain the exterior facade according to that. Inside their houses they can do whatever they want, but outside they have to be uniform. And it's similar in many places of the world, in Greece, in Morocco, other places where Jews and Arabs live. And typical of example similar to this is also the city of Toledo, Spain. All right, let's proceed. Something else that is very interesting about Old Jaffa is the streets are all named like the signs of the zodiac. So for example, if you look up here, we can see this is Sagittarius Street. And over here, notice it says the way of the zodiac. And there's all the rest of the streets as well. Now down here leads to the port of Jaffa, where we're going right now. All right, so here we are in the ancient port of Jaffa, which in old times used to be the main entrance point into this land, but it is now just a recreational port. This is the place from where Jonah embarked to go to Tarsus, trying to flee from the wrath of the Lord. And you can also see behind me this rock or cluster of rocks over there. This is referred to as the rocks of Andromeda. And legend says that the governor of Jaffa had a very beautiful daughter named Andromeda. And her mother boasted that she was even prettier than the sea nymphs. And so that angered Poseidon, god of the depth, that sent a marine monster to destroy the coasts of this land. And the only way to assuage the fury of the monster was to sacrifice young Andromeda. And so they tied her to this rock over there, and the monster started coming closer and closer. And so the young girl, Andromeda, she screamed for help, and her lover, Perseus, rode on his winged steed, slew the monster, and brought her to safety, where they lived happily ever after. So what is this door? Anybody has any idea? Doesn't look like much. And some of you, those that are quick, you immediately look at the sign above that says in French, Église Gréco-Orthodoxe, Greek Orthodox Church, named after Saint Michael. But how many of you have seen churches that have usually closed doors? Not today, because today is Sunday and they are having here a service, and it is sort of tucked away in the middle of nothing, sort of hidden. So in spite of the fact that the sign says that this is a church, it is today a church, but it wasn't one in the past. In the past, it was a road in. Now, why did they need that? Since 1517 onwards, Jaffa became the main entrance point of pilgrims into this land. Only then, it wasn't like it is today that you get on the plane and 12 hours later, you're in the other side of the world. Back then, people boarded ships and for months spent at sea trying to get here. And once they got here to Jaffa, the first thing they want to do is head out to Jerusalem. But Jerusalem is a good 45 hours away. It's a treacherous road. There are highway robbers. And you needed to have a military escort for those pilgrims that went to Jerusalem. But they weren't going to give a military escort to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that came here. And because of that, oftentimes people had to wait even 6 months for enough people to gather and justify one such military escort. And where did they stay? In the inns provided by their faith. So this was a Greek Orthodox inn, but there were also Catholics, there were Jewish, there were Muslims. Later on, there were Protestant ones as well. And this is the story of this little place. Come on, let's continue. Does anybody know who this uniformed gentleman is? This is Napoleon. Napoleon Bonaparte, the French general. Now, wait a minute. French general, what in the world is he doing here? Turns out that Napoleon came up from Egypt, conquering all of the coastal cities, passing through Jaffa and going all the way up to Akko, Acres, in northern Israel. There, he besieged the city for several months, but to no avail. And being mad with himself for not having succeeded in taking over Akko, he retraced his steps back into Jaffa, setting everything behind him on fire, leaving nothing but scorched land, and from here headed back to Europe without fulfilling his dream. Hence, the reason that Napoleon is here. All right, so we can see here the central square of Old Jaffa, and today it is very quiet. Just in front of us, this big structure is St. Peter's Church, a Catholic church named after Peter's vision that was here, in which we talked about in Acts 10. But in the days of Napoleon, this was the hospital. In 1799, this was the hospital where Napoleon left all of his plague-infested soldiers and the wounded prior to heading back to Europe without fulfilling his dream of becoming emperor of the world. And there are those that say that even 3 years after he left, one could still smell the stench of death in the air. Notice also, we see that fountain over there that is not running, but all the statues are the symbols of the zodiac, all 12 of them. We saw that the streets here are named like the zodiac. And just over here, there is an area covering an underground archaeological museum. During summer nights, there's concerts here, street festivals with artists, dancers, very, very nice. Right now, in times of the pandemic, things are looking slightly different. But we're going to bring it all to you.